I paid $110,000 for my son's lavish wedding, but he cruelly texted me the night before, forbidding my attendance because my working-class vibe would embarrass his wife's aristocratic family. He disowned me with just one cowardly text. But that boy and his snobby in-laws had no idea about a shocking truth. The old shipyard foreman wearing worn-out clothes who they trampled on is actually a hidden billionaire controlling the entire seaport in London. Their upper-class facade, the Aston Martin supercar they drive or the house they live in, all of it is in my hands. My anger truly exploded when I discovered that to fund that fake wedding setup, they had despicably stolen and pawned the priceless paintings and keepsakes of my late wife for a miserable price of $2,500. You might think I would scream or beg. No, the most vicious revenge is absolute silence. I personally stepped onto the stage, shattered their entire illusion of wealth, and turned that million-dollar wedding into a crime scene. How did this journey of turning the tables unfold? Before we go into the details, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing which moment in the story impressed you the most. The smell of beeswax shoe polish and old suede filled the tiny kitchen, creeping into every corner of the silent space. I sat there under the sallow light, meticulously rubbing a ragged cloth in small circles over the toe of my worn leather shoes. The tick-tock of the grandfather clock on the wall beat a steady rhythm, counting down the hours to the most important day in my son's life. I am Arthur Pendleton, 68 years old. To the passers-by out there, and even to my own flesh-and-blood son, I am just a retired shipyard foreman, a washed-up old man wasting away his days in a run-down little house in the London suburbs. They look at my grease-stained work clothes, my flannel shirt frayed at the elbows, and the old truck I drive, and they automatically assume I belong to the lower class. But people often die from the things they don't see. What no one in that fake aristocratic family of my future daughter-in-law, Beatrice Kensington, knows is that beneath this rough and impoverished exterior, I am a tycoon. I don't live on a meager pension. I own a series of the busiest seaport warehouses in London, control massive commercial supply chains, and hold enough wealth to buy out their entire arrogant lineage and still have spare change to tip the waiter. I hid my wealth because I wanted Oliver, my only son, to learn the value of hard work. I spent 42 years of my life working until my bones cracked every time the weather changed, biting down on the pain from a brutal scar left by a piece of steel cutting through my hand at the mechanic shop in 2001, just so Oliver could have a smooth, flawless life. Just 48 hours ago, I quietly operated my computer and executed a massive transfer of $110,000 in cash. That money was pumped straight into the account of the Royal Crown Estate, the most luxurious event palace in England. Beatrice had screamed at Oliver that only this place was worthy of her family's royal status. And Oliver, the boy, was so cowardly that he just bowed his head and begged me to open my wallet. I paid for everything, from the expensive orchid arrangements, from the bubbling champagne glasses, to every blade of grass they would proudly walk on tomorrow. I thought a father could sacrifice his last drop of blood to see his son happy. Right then, the clock struck 6:30 in the evening. My phone vibrated violently on the oak table. The dry, sharp vibration cut through my thoughts. I wiped my hands on the torn towel, the corners of my mouth involuntarily curling into a rare smile. I had been waiting for a call, an excited cheer, or at least a thank you message from Oliver, for the massive amount of money I had just offered up for their vain theatrical play. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up. a message from Oliver. I squinted to read the first line. Then I read it a second time. The third time, I took off my glasses, wiped the lenses, put them back on, and stared at the screen as if I were facing a death sentence. Dad, the plan has changed. It is best that you don't come to the wedding tomorrow. Beatrice is very stressed. She says that your poor working-class vibe will embarrass her aristocratic family. They aren't used to interacting with people who look like manual laborers. Your presence will ruin our big day. You don't belong in that world, so just stay home, Dad. I'll send you photos later. I stared blankly at the screen until the blue light faded, sinking into pitch-black darkness. The silence in the kitchen at this moment was no longer peaceful. It was a dead space. The air felt as if it had been drained from my lungs. A poor working-class vibe. Embarrass. You don't belong in that world. Those words were not a knife stabbing quietly in the back. They were an axe swinging straight at my face, ruthless, decisive, and bloody. The son I had raised for 29 years, the son whose diapers I had changed myself, whose expensive tuition I had paid, for whom I had bought an Aston Martin supercar so he could show off to the world. He was now throwing me away with a cowardly text message. He didn't even have the courage of a man to call and say it to my face. He forbade me from entering the party that I had paid for with my own blood and sweat. You might think I would collapse on the table and cry miserably. You might think I would frantically throw the phone at the wall, smash a wine bottle, and scream his name in despair. No. Absolutely not. Loud rage is a privilege reserved for the weak and powerless. I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't pant. I slowly placed the phone down on the table, the movement so gentle and precise it was chilling. A feeling of extreme coldness, sharp as an iceberg, slowly spread through my chest. It was the feeling of an experienced engineer discovering that the foundation of a high-rise building had completely rotted from the inside. You don't scream angrily at a rusted concrete pillar. You coldly tear it down. I looked down at my hands, the rough calluses, the broad knuckles, the cracks filled with the dirt of time. These very hands had signed the 1 to 10 $0 check to feed their aristocratic illusion. They thought I was a senile, weak old man, trembling and living on pity. They thought I would quietly swallow this insult, hiding in a corner of the house like an old dog kicked away by its master. They were wrong, a fatal mistake. They didn't know that they had just provoked a real monster. I slowly stood up. My knee joints cracked in the quiet space. I walked to the back of the kitchen door, where my only charcoal suit was formerly hanging. I had dry cleaned it, ironed every fold perfectly, just waiting for the moment to walk my son down the aisle. Now, that suit looked exactly like a cheap costume for a delusional clown. I reached out and took the hanger down, stroking the cold fabric. One last time, I turned around, took firm steps toward the deepest, darkest corner of the closet, and hung it there. I slammed the closet door shut. A loud thud rang out, permanently cutting off all ties of this garbage bloodline. Family, kinship, sacrifice. These were all cheap concepts when faced with greed and arrogance. Tomorrow, Oliver Pendleton will wake up, put on an expensive suit, apply shiny hair wax, and step into the Royal Crown Estate with the smug smile of an elite. He will expect a glamorous stage, rounds of applause, and a future bathed in silk. But he won't ever know that, tonight, his poor father has officially started a massive crushing machine. I won't just take back the $110,000. I'll strip away all their illusions of wealth, smash their fake, aristocratic stage, and turn that $1 million wedding into a horrific disaster scene. Just wait, son. The game of turning the tables has now truly begun. That night, the darkness in my study thickened, cold and silent as a tomb. I opened my laptop. The blue light from the screen cast over my old face, revealing the deep lines of a life weathered by storms. Did they think I would scream and cry? Did they think I would call and beg them to throw me a pity ticket to attend the wedding I paid for? No. The wrath of a man with absolute power never makes a sound. It operates like a guillotine, sharp, clinical, and irreversible. I accessed my secure banking portal. The $110,000 cash transaction transferred to the Royal Crown Estate was still pending. They thought my money was a natural river that would never run dry, an obvious privilege they were entitled to bleed. I hovered my mouse over the Options tab. My finger, bearing the sinewy scars from a steel shard back in my shipyard days, gently clicked. Report transaction. The banking system asked for a reason. I typed 3 neat words, cold as a death sentence, not authorized. Enter. The screen reloaded in the blink of an eye. The $110,000 transaction was permanently cancelled. The cash flow was blocked. With just one click, I drained all the blood from the fake aristocratic stage they planned to step onto tomorrow. But that wasn't enough. A good engineer knows that severing an artery isn't enough to kill a tumor. You have to cut off all its nutrient sources. I switched to the supplementary credit card I had given to Oliver. A limit of $7,500 a month. Looking at the recent transaction history, the corner of my mouth twitched into a smile of contempt. $6,200 had just been swiped at the Lotus Wellness Retreat, a luxurious high-end spa. My noble daughter-in-law, Beatrice Kensington, had used the blood, sweat, and tears of an old working-class man to plaster gold on her face, getting hot stone massages to prepare for a wedding from which that same old man was banned. I clicked the emergency disable button. The system asked if I wanted to issue a replacement card. I chose no. Tick-tock. Their illusion was officially destroyed. Tonight, they would sleep on silk, but tomorrow morning, they would wake up in ashes. 6:00 a.m. Saturday. The London suburban sky still lingered with fog and a bone-chilling cold. Despite the fact that it was only a few hours until my son's royal wedding, I casually wore my frayed flannel shirt, put on my mud-caked work boots, and pushed the roaring lawnmower into the front yard. The smell of fresh grass hit my nose. I worked with the steady, unhurried rhythm of a true laborer, a stark contrast to the ticking time bomb about to detonate. At exactly 6:15, the morning silence was ripped apart by the deafening roar of a V8 engine. The Aston Martin supercar worth over $140,000 tore through the wind, swerving sharply and slamming its brakes right in front of my lawn. The wheels tore up a patch of green grass I had just tended to. The car doors burst open. Oliver rushed out. The boy was wearing a wrinkled designer silk shirt, his face pale, drained of every drop of blood. Right behind him was Beatrice. She stormed out with her eyes wide open, her elaborately blown-out hair now a tangled mess of sheer panic. "Dad!" Oliver screamed, his voice shattering, completely lost to terror. "Dad, call the bank right now. My cards are declined. All my cards everywhere are giving an error." Beatrice ran over, her sharp high heels sinking into the mud. She didn't even bother to greet me, lunging in and hissing like a venomous snake whose tail had been stepped on. "What the hell did you do?" I was at the hair salon down the street, and when I swiped the card to pay the makeup artist, the machine said it was locked. Locked. I was humiliated in front of the staff. The whole hotel looked at me like a beggar. "Fix this damn error right now." I didn't turn off the lawnmower. I let the engine rumble, deliberately drowning out their pathetic presence. Unhurried. I pulled a rag from my back pocket, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and then reached over to kill the engine. The space suddenly fell into a dead silence. I looked straight into Oliver's eyes, my gaze as cold as a submerged iceberg. "There is no error, Oliver. The bank isn't wrong. Your card isn't malfunctioning." Oliver froze, his eyes wide and vacant. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the $7,500 card your fiancé just used to blow $6,200 on a spa facial has been permanently deactivated." I articulated every word decisively. "And by the way, the $110,000 payment to the Royal Crown Estate has also been cancelled." I reported it as an unauthorized transaction. Beatrice's mouth fell open, stepping back as if she had just been slapped by lightning. The extreme shock contorted her face, her expensive makeup seemingly melting away. "You cancelled the wedding. Are you crazy? The ceremony starts in a few hours. The distinguished guests of our aristocratic family are arriving. What right do you have to cancel it?" "I have the right of the person paying for it, little girl," I replied, my voice not raised but powerful enough to crush her arrogance to dust. "You said my working-class vibe would embarrass your high society world. So, let me see how your high society world pays its own bills." "Dad." Oliver trembled, tears threatening to spill. "You're killing me. You can't do this. They'll kick us out of the hall." "Dad, please turn the card back on, I beg you. This poor class has no right to sponsor the elite." I casually walked over to the smoothly idling Aston Martin and held out my calloused hand. "The keys. Give them here." "What?" Oliver stammered, stepping back. "This supercar is worth over $140,000. The registration is under Arthur Pendleton's name." I roared, the authoritative voice of a supply chain tycoon smashing his weak resistance. "You forbade me from attending your wedding, so my car has no reason to be a prop in your play. Give me the keys, or I'll call the cops and report it stolen." Right now, Oliver's pride completely collapsed. His hand clumsily reached into his pocket, trembling as he dropped the keys into my palm. The sound of clashing metal rang out crisp and clear. Beatrice shrieked, lunging forward to grab Oliver's arm. "What the hell are you doing?" "If you give him the car, how will my parents get from Heathrow Airport when they land from Monaco? Where is their fleet of cars?" Hearing that, I smiled, the most ruthless and refreshing smile I had ever worn. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number. "Hello, Winston." I spoke loudly, just enough volume so that every word acted like a drill piercing the ears of the two people standing paralyzed in front of me. "Old friend, Arthur here. Cancel the entire fleet of luxury cars picking up Charles and Victoria Kensington at Heathrow Airport this morning. That's right, cancel it all. This client has no budget left. Let those two aristocrats call a taxi themselves. Or, better yet, take the public bus." I hung up, shoving the phone into my pocket. Beatrice covered her face, a choked scream caught in her throat. The entire world of illusion she had painstakingly built through parasitism had completely shattered into pieces in less than 5 minutes. Now I turned my back, taking firm steps toward the house, not bothering to look back at the pathetic ruins behind me. "Get off my lawn. Let me see how long your aristocratic facade holds up without my blood to leach off." The door slammed shut. The first strike was complete. But I knew this game wasn't over yet, because their greed hid secrets far dirtier than this. At exactly 9 a.m., the London fog was still thick, freezing, and clinging to the arrogant red brick houses on Kensington Row. This place was a sanctuary for the elite, where people wearing $1,000 suits and carrying Hermes bags strolled. But this morning, that quiet and upper-class atmosphere was about to be shattered by a rough old shipyard foreman. I stood in front of house number 42, with both hands stuffed deep into the pockets of my worn-out coat, breathing out plumes of white smoke. On my right was Graham, a property trust specialist, and the most cunning lawyer money could buy. On my left was Colin, a security systems engineer with 30 years of experience, who knew every lock and safe in England. This house was rented under the name of Oliver, my son, at a nominal, dirt-cheap price of $1,500 a month. They always proudly bragged to their friends that this was the nest they rented with their own real abilities. But the truth often takes a cruel form. The real owner of this house was a shell company belonging to a wealth network over which I held absolute control. I turned to Graham, my voice cold, sharp as a scalpel. "Do it, Graham." Graham nodded, his fingers gliding quickly over his tablet. "I've just activated the breach of contract clause, Mr. Pendleton. The promotional rate of $1,500 has been cancelled. The rent is immediately pushed to the market rate of $4,500 a month. Furthermore, because they are late on multiple payments, an emergency eviction order has gone into effect this very second." One click, their illusion of ownership officially vanished into smoke. "Colin," I signalled. The locksmith stepped forward. The cold clanking of metal rang out in the space. In less than 2 minutes, a crisp, dry click signalled that the expensive security system had completely surrendered. The heavy oak door swung wide open. I stepped inside, followed by the smell of expensive scented candles, stale wine, and a pungent odor of a fake, hedonistic lifestyle. The house was a garbage dump of vanity. Designer shoes were thrown around. Half-empty crystal glasses lay scattered across the marble countertops. They were rushing to prepare for their royal wedding, leaving behind a disgusting mess. I ignored it all, taking long, heavy strides straight down the hallway toward the master bedroom. My heartbeat pulsed in slow, thick beats. A terrible premonition, a chilling uneasiness was tearing at my chest. I pushed the bedroom door hard. The hinges shrieked with a piercing sound. And then I stopped dead. The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. The air in the room felt drained. I didn't look at the messy bed or the scattered designer clothes. My eyes were glued to the walls. The walls were completely empty. The oil landscape paintings of the roaring Cornwall Sea and the wild Scottish Highlands, works painted by the very hands of my late wife Eleanor, with all her soul, had disappeared. In their place were empty, stark white spaces, looking exactly like inflamed red scars gouged deep into the wall paint. I lunged at the vanity table. Eleanor's mother-of-pearl, inlaid wooden jewelry box had its lid smashed open. Empty. There was no pearl necklace left. There were no gold cufflinks left. All the priceless keepsakes that held the soul and warmth of the wife I loved most had been robbed clean. The initial shock was quickly incinerated by a pitch-black rage. I frantically rummaged, flipping over blankets and mattresses, tearing open drawers. Clothes, underwear, and handbags fell loosely to the floor. I panted, my eyes bloodshot like a wild beast backed into a corner. And then, as I kicked away a shoebox under the bed, the toe of my shoe touched a scrap of paper. A crumpled piece of paper, balled up and thrown away like worthless trash. I bent down and picked it up. My scarred and calloused fingers trembled as I smoothed out the creases. Under the sallow light of the bedside lamp, the black printed words appeared clearly. The logo of high street pawnbrokers sat prominently in the top corner. My eyes scanned the detailed list. Item 1 Cornwall landscape oil painting. Item 2 Scottish Highlands landscape painting. Item 3 original pearl necklace. Item 4 gold cufflinks. And the final number, The total sum for selling out a mother's soul, $10,500. I stood rooted to the spot, my breath choked in my throat. $500. A dirt cheap, filthy price, the absolute depths of humiliation. They had sold off all the keepsakes of a deceased mother, heartlessly trampling on this family's legacy just for a handful of loose change. And for what? To patch up that empty, vain wedding tent. My brain quickly pieced the numbers together. I recalled the invoices they had once demanded I pay. They had used $350 from this blood money just to upgrade some useless orchids for the banquet tables. And $7 in cash to pick up the designer wedding dress on Bond Street for that woman named Beatrice. A harsh, bitter laugh burst from my throat. It wasn't a laugh, it was the growl of a complete and utter break. The heartbreak, the anguish of a father officially died in this moment. Every illusion of blood ties, every hope that my son was just an impulsive child was crushed into dust by this receipt. I didn't shed a single tear. A clinical silence, so cold it froze every cell, enveloped me. I turned around, stomping my heel hard onto Oliver's expensive silk shirt lying on the floor, and strode out to the living room. Graham and Colin were waiting, both sensing the overwhelming murderous aura radiating from me. They took a step back. I held the crumpled receipt up in front of Graham. The tone of my voice didn't waver at all. It was calm and sharp as a chainsaw running at top speed. "Graham," I called his name, my eyes a bottomless abyss. "Prepare a criminal complaint immediately. The charge is grand theft." Graham froze, his old eyes widening as he looked at the receipt, then at me. "Sir, but that's Oliver. That's your son." I stepped closer, emphasizing every word, throwing those words into the air like massive boulders. "No, that boy is no longer my son. He is a thief. And in my world, a thief must pay the price with destruction." I turned on my heel and walked out the wide-open door, out into the foggy London air. Their wedding was now counted in minutes. They were wearing wedding dresses, slicking back their hair with shiny wax, longing for a royal stage. And me, I was bringing a death sentence to hand to them personally. "The stage is about to collapse, Oliver." There were exactly 45 minutes left until Oliver and Beatrice's wedding of the century officially began. The Royal Crown Estate Event Palace appeared as magnificent as a wild dream of the aristocracy. Crystal chandeliers worth $300 cast a regal golden light onto the Italian marble floor. Thousands of pure white orchid branches were meticulously arranged along the aisle. The scent of fresh flowers, expensive perfume, and thick arrogance filled the air. I pushed the double-tempered glass doors and stepped into the grand hall. Crossing a beach of custom-tailored tuxedos and silk evening gowns, I looked like an eyesore of a stain. I wore my faded coat, old mud-caked leather shoes, and a face deeply etched with the weathered wrinkles of a shipyard foreman. Before I could take 10 steps, a man wearing a perfect tailcoat, with a name tag reading Alistair Event Director pinned to his chest, rushed out to block my way. His face wrinkled, exuding utter contempt. "Hey, old man, are you lost?" Alistair snapped, raising a hand to push me away. "The entrance for porters and janitors is at the back door. Today we have an extremely important event for the upper class. Don't dirty our carpets." I didn't step back. I brushed his hand away, my cold eyes looking straight into the wide, indignant eyes of the phony director. "Alistair." "Right," I spoke in a deep voice, ringing sharp as a metal saw blade. "Call the parent company in London right now. Tell them that Arthur Pendleton, chairman of the board and legal owner of this entire Royal Crown Estate property, is standing right here, and if you don't clear the way in 3 seconds, you'll be out on the street sweeping trash tomorrow morning. Alistair froze as if struck by lightning. The colour drained from his face instantly, turning a ghastly shade of dead cement. His eyes widened, frantically darting from my frayed clothes to my face. Then, as if realizing the resemblance to the portrait of the mysterious boss hanging in the closed boardroom, his knees trembled. "Mr. Pendleton." Alistair stammered, his voice shattering from sheer terror. He bowed 90 degrees, cold sweat soaking his forehead. "I am so sorry, sir. Please forgive me. Cut all the background music," I ordered, not sparing him another glance, "and throw the main hall doors wide open. This stage is mine." As I stepped through the giant double doors into the main hall, Beatrice was standing on the podium of honor. She wore a lavish $7,000 wedding dress, bought with cash on Bond Street, holding a glass of champagne, laughing and talking falsely amidst a circle of upper-class guests. Standing beside her, Oliver was smoothing his suit lapels, wearing the smug expression of a man who thought he held the entire world in his hands. Below them, Mr. and Mrs. Charles and Victoria Kensington were puffing out their chests, raising their chins to accept congratulations like true royalty. I walked straight up to the stage podium. The music abruptly cut off. The noisy atmosphere instantly fell into silence. Hundreds of astonished, disdainful, and confused eyes were glued to the poor man who had just broken into their sanctuary. Oliver turned around. When he saw me, his face distorted in panic. "Dad, what the hell are you doing here? I told you not to come. Security, where is security? Drag him out of here." Alistair and the large security guards stood perfectly still in the corners, their heads bowed, not a single one daring to move an inch. I snatched the microphone from the MC's hand. A piercing feedback screech rang out, shattering the eardrums of everyone standing in the hall. I glanced over hundreds of faces wrapped in hypocrisy, then directed my razor-sharp gaze toward the Kensington family. "Welcome to the fake aristocracy of London," I began, my volume not too loud but powerful enough to crush any whispers. "My son, Oliver, and his bride must have told you that he personally arranged all this luxury. He told me that my working-class vibe would embarrass the noble Kensington family, that I don't belong in this high society world." Beatrice's mouth fell open, her face twisted. She tried to lunge forward to grab the microphone, but I just glared at her, and she immediately stepped back in fear. "But there is a truth that these parasites haven't had the chance to tell you, yet I articulated every word. Every orchid in this hall, every piece of lobster you are about to eat, and this entire $110,000 stage, all of it was paid for with the blood, sweat, and calloused hands of the shipyard foreman standing right in front of you." The hall erupted in astonishment. A few guests began to whisper. I turned and pointed my finger straight at Charles Kensington's face, who was standing frozen below the stage platform. "And you, Charles Kensington, you call yourself an elite hedge fund manager. You despise manual laborers. Tell your aristocratic friends how your mansion in the Cotswolds was foreclosed by the bank, and you were thrown out on the street 6 months ago. Your Kensington family is actually just an empty shell, drowning in debt, trying to cling to the money of an old man you despise." "Shut your mouth," Charles yelled, his face as red as a fighting rooster, but his legs were trembling violently because his dirtiest secret had been stripped bare in broad daylight. "I'm not done yet," I roared, cutting off his shout. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the crumpled receipt. The air in the hall thickened, suffocatingly tight. I stared at Oliver. He was stepping back, his eyes wide with absolute horror. He knew what I was holding. "Oliver," my voice suddenly dropped, as cold as an echo from the dead. I was ready to silently endure being banned by you. I was going to leave you alone. But you and your wife crossed the line of humanity. You all wonder how the bride had $700 in cash to get that wedding dress. How they had $350 to upgrade the orchids for the banquet tables. I held the receipt high. They broke into a safe. They stole all the oil paintings and jewelry of Eleanor, his late mother, the woman who loved him with her whole life. And they sold it all at a cheap pawn shop for a miserable price, $2,500. I tossed the receipt into the air. The piece of paper spiraled, slowly falling right in front of Beatrice's expensive shoes. It fell like toxic garbage, completely shattering all illusions, all pride and honor of both families. I didn't buy you a stage so you could sell your mother's soul, Oliver. And in my world, a thief must pay the price with destruction. The moment the receipt touched the ground, the piercing sirens of police cars rang out continuously from outside the hall. 4 British Royal Police officers in neat uniforms took strong, long strides, pushing the grand doors open and marching in. The wedding instantly turned into a horrific, chaotic mess. The upper-class guests panicked and backed away to the sides, leaving a dead zone in the middle. Oliver dropped to his knees on the marble floor. Dad, please don't do this," he sobbed, clutching his head. Completely broken, the police approached. The cold clanking of metal rang out. Handcuffs snapped straight onto Oliver and Beatrice's wrists right in the middle of the wedding stage. Beatrice screamed frantically, her expensive silk wedding dress scraping against the dirt-covered floor as she tried to struggle in despair. Oliver Pendleton, Beatrice Kensington, you are under arrest for the charge of grand theft, the police officer declared loudly. I didn't look at them for another second. I threw the microphone to the floor. A dry thud rang out, permanently sealing the end of a rotten family. I turned around, leisurely walking down the stage, parting through the crowd, standing in dead silence. Their most glamorous stage had officially collapsed, and I walked out, leaving behind an irreversible pile of ashes. The fluorescent lights flickered continuously, casting a pale, cold light down into the interrogation room of the London police station. This place reeked of industrial bleach mixed with the pungent smell of absolute terror. I sat there, my hands resting loosely on the stainless steel table, as still as a sculpture carved from the hardest concrete block. The heavy metal door swung open. The police officer escorting Oliver stepped inside. My elite aristocratic son now looked no different from a soaked sewer rat. His expensive suit had been stripped away, replaced by a grey, wrinkled inmate uniform. His eyes were swollen and bloodshot, and the hands that were once only used to applying hair wax and holding champagne glasses were now locked tight by cold handcuffs. The clinking of the iron chains rang out chillingly in the cramped space. As soon as he saw me, his legs gave out. Oliver lunged toward the table, tears streaming down his face, drooling miserably. Dad, please save me." His voice shattered into choking, pathetic sobs. "I can't stay in this animal cage. They'll tear me apart. Dad, please bail me out. Pay them, Dad. I'll do anything. Please, Dad." I didn't blink. I didn't move a single millimeter. My eyes pinned him down, sharp and cold as a surgical scalpel. "Do you think I came here to save you, Oliver?" The tone of my voice was deep, holding not even a single drop of pity. I came here to look straight into the face of the man who dug the grave of his own late mother. Oliver stopped, his entire body trembling violently. The extreme panic made him hurriedly grasp at the most cowardly life-preserver. A man could think of blaming someone else. "It's Beatrice's fault. It's all that witch's fault, Dad." He screamed frantically, his eyes wide with despair. She pushed me. She was obsessed with perfection. She said that wedding stage had to be high class. She told me to sell those paintings. She said you were a senile old man who would never find out. I was forced, Dad. I was forced. A bitter laugh burst from my throat, dry and cruel. I leaned forward, narrowing the distance between father and son, so he could fully feel the overwhelming murderous intent radiating from his poor working-class father. You sold off the priceless keepsakes containing your mother's soul for a miserable price of $2,500. And now, less than 24 hours later, you sell out and tear apart the very woman you just swore to love on stage. I emphasized every word, throwing them in his face like massive boulders. You aren't a man, Oliver. You are a cowardly, shameless, and absolute scum of a parasite. But I'm your son. I'm your own flesh and blood, he screamed, the piercing sound shattering in despair. Flesh and blood doesn't give you the right to become a thief. I stood up straight, the towering stature of a shipyard foreman, completely overpowering his weakness. You forbade me from attending your wedding because you despised my working-class vibe. You wanted to step into the world of the aristocratic elite, didn't you? So today, let the law of the upper class teach you the price of growing up. I turned on my heel. Oliver screamed madly behind me, banging his head against the steel table, begging, calling my name in utter despair. I walked out into the hallway, not looking back once. The steel door slammed shut with a firm thud. That sound permanently severed all the binding ties of toxic kinship. The fake prince was officially locked in the dungeon, stripped of all the privileges he once considered his by right. The game was over. 45 days later, the garbage world they painstakingly built had been swept clean by me, leaving not a single crumb. The luxurious townhouse on Kensington Row was kicked onto the market and sold off in less than a week. The fake Kensington aristocrats also had to flee London in complete humiliation. I personally drove my old truck to the high street pawnbroker's shop. I threw a stack of cash straight onto the glass counter, redeeming all the landscape paintings of Cornwall, the Scottish Highlands, and Eleanor's pearl necklace. When I touched the wooden frame of the oil painting, I felt my wife's warmth returning. The soul of the house was finally safe, but I didn't stop there. I didn't keep a single penny of the massive amount of money obtained from selling the Kensington house. I transferred all of it into a brand new trust fund, named the Eleanor Pendleton Scholarship Fund. This fund wasn't for people who pretended to be aristocrats. It was set up with an ironclad contract. All the money would be used to fully fund working-class youth in England, kids with grease-stained hands who yearned to learn mechanics, shipbuilding, and engineering. The very poor working-class vibe that Oliver and Beatrice had spat upon would now be the launching pad for hundreds of people who were truly valuable to society. I had returned my blood, sweat, and tears to exactly where they belonged, to the honest working class. This rebirth of value was the final, most cruel slap to the empty arrogance of my son. The scenery outside the airplane window was an endless stretch of blue silk. I was sitting in a comfortable leather seat in first class on a British Airways flight. This time, the ticket wasn't bought to serve those who used me, but was bought for myself with the very money I made. The destination of the flight was the beautiful island of Santorini, Greece, the place Eleanor had always dreamed of visiting when she was alive, but we had to put it off to save money for the tuition of a traitorous son. The beautiful flight attendant smiled and poured me a glass of fine red wine. I took the glass, swirling it gently, so the shimmering liquid caught the brilliant sunlight streaming through the window. I took a sip. The taste of freedom had never been so sweet and intoxicating. The burden of a blindly sacrificing father, the foolish endurance of 29 years had been completely stripped away, left behind in that cold London prison. Looking down at my hands covered in scars and calluses, I no longer saw impoverished roughness. I saw strength. I saw power. I saw a man who had finally smashed the shackles of misplaced selflessness. The sky out there was so high and blue. Starting from this moment, Arthur Pendleton would only live for himself. Thank you for joining me to the very end of this explosive and dark story. If Arthur's silent but destructive journey of turning the tables made you feel satisfied, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next dramatic stories and sharp revenges. Leave a comment below, letting me know which punishment from the father impressed you the most. A parent's love and sacrifice are priceless, but blind sacrifice will only create selfish and delusional parasites. When you give away everything without demanding respect, people will take what you do for granted and readily trample on it when greed arises. Sometimes, the greatest lesson, the bravest act of love we can give someone, is not to shield them, but to let them fall and pay the price for their own cruelty. Never let anyone, even your own flesh and blood, strip away your dignity and your hard work. Thank you for listening.